Juror number 52, Brandon Mitchell. We know that he is somebody who is a part of the deliberation process for the Derek Chauvin trial, and he has been somebody who has been out in front of the media very recently now, sort of, happy that he got to play his part. He got to serve a role in this trial, and we've covered this a couple times now on this channel, but we're going to go through it again because there's yet another revelation. There's a podcast that came out very recently after the other incident that we talked about. Remember, there was the March on Washington, March for Washington. Then there was another August incident. And we're going to go through these piecemeal because this may, in fact, trigger a new trial. This may trigger something else to happen with the Derek Chauvin case. And good Lord, we just finished that. Are we going to have to do this again? Are you kidding me? All right, well, let's go to the story. We're going to start by going to NBC News. This was written yesterday by Janelle Griffith. Says that a juror in the trial of the Derek Chauvin case, the former Minneapolis police officer, of course, we know killed George Floyd, participated in a summer march on Washington last summer, a move that is coming under scrutiny after Chauvin's attorney requested a new trial on several grounds, including juror misconduct. The attorney, Eric Nelson, did not refer to the juror's participation in the march in his request for a new trial on Tuesday. Chauvin, who is white, was convicted last month of second-degree murder. We all know that. In a photo from last August's commitment march that surfaced recently, the juror, Brandon Mitchell, who is black, is seen wearing a t-shirt with an image of Martin Luther King Jr. and the phrase, "Get your knee off our necks." In the photo, he's smiling alongside two other men wearing a hat that said BLM, which stands, of course, for Black Lives Matter. Mitchell did not respond to requests for comments, but he was defended his participation in the march, which was held on the 57th anniversary of King's I Have a Dream speech at the first March on Washington. Mitchell told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune that he did not view the march as being against police brutality, right? And so this is one of the questions. Many people are saying, well, okay, maybe it was just a civil rights march. Maybe it had nothing to do with George Floyd. Maybe this was not even about police brutality. This was just about civil rights, that something we have been celebrating and cherishing in this country for a long time, and we want to encourage that. So maybe that's all it was, and maybe this isn't a big deal. But the questionnaire, we're learning, that was on the juror questionnaire, the question specifically said something about any anti-police or protests that were marching against police brutality. So we're going to take a look at about how this breaks down and maybe if there is some overlap there. And he says that this was 100% not a rally for Floyd. He said the opportunity to go to D.C., the opportunity to be around thousands and thousands of black people, I just thought it was a good opportunity to be a part of something, he said. Now, this is the image, right? This is what we talked about earlier in the week. The next generation being socially active, representing in D.C. my son, my nephew, Brandon Renee Mitchell, and my brother, right? And so this is the image that first came out. This is him with the shirt on it, right? And this was the March on Washington protest in commemoration of MLK. And this says, though, right, this is BLM that has two of the BLM fists here. Then we have "Get your knee off our necks." And then we have the hat that says BLM. So obviously, very clearly, an anti-police movement. Get your knee off of our necks. Who had the knee on Floyd's neck? Well, it was Derek Chauvin, who's a police officer. And so he's saying, Black Lives Matter, the whole movement sort of originated out of anti-police brutality. And so the idea here that this was not about George Floyd when he's wearing a t-shirt that says "Get your knee off our neck," which was the crux of the entire case, leaves a little bit to be desired. Some have speculated that Mitchell's participation in the march could be grounds for an appeal, but legal experts said it was unlikely that it alone would be enough to overturn Chauvin's conviction. So we have Dmitry Shakenovich, a professor at the J. John College of Criminal Justice. He says, "It's certainly possible that this will be used to support various post-conviction efforts, of which one is an appeal. At the end of the day, irrespective of his specific comments, there would have to be a showing that had he not served on the jury or disclosed this information, the verdict would have been different." So in other words, if we would have known, could this have been consequential? In other words, is this some sort of an error that wouldn't have adjusted the outcome anyways? Who knows, right? Who knows what happened in that deliberation room? Maybe. We haven't really heard from any other jurors, have we yet? We heard from the alternate who came and spoke out, but she wasn't in the deliberation room because she was relieved before the deliberations started. So we also know that a lot of the jurors didn't even exchange information. They weren't exchanging names or contact information. They weren't there. Everybody was being very careful about not saying too much, according to the alternate juror who was excused. So according to this attorney, he says that's a very high standard to meet. However, it is possible that Mitchell and other jurors could be questioned during what is called a Schwartz hearing to determine whether an outside influence prejudiced the jury. Mitchell said that the photo was originally posted on social media by his uncle around August 28th and March, and that the two men next to Mitchell in the photo are his cousins. Mitchell said that he has no recollection of wearing or owning the shirt. Floyd's brother and sister, Philanice and Bridget Floyd, spoke at the march in Washington last summer, which again goes against this idea that it was 100% not for George Floyd, right? That was his quote. He says it was 100% not a rally for Floyd. But then when we go over here, it says, well, yeah, his Floyd's brother and sister spoke there, as did other relatives of other people who had been shot by police. So it was clearly a Floyd related protest and an anti-police protest. Nelson and John Stiles, spokesman for Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, whose office prosecuted the case, declined to comment on the photo. Mitchell, a youth basketball coach, was the first juror to go public about the trial and the deliberations. He has said that during the trial, he never watched the bystander video of Floyd's deadly encounter with the police because it was too gruesome. Maybe you believe that. Mitchell told Star Tribune that he had answered no to 2 questions on a questionnaire for potential jurors. What were the questions? The first asked whether he or someone close to him had participated in any of the demonstrations or marches against police brutality that took place in Minneapolis after Floyd's death. And he could say, of course, no, right? Because he was in D.C. The second asked, other than what you have already described above, have you or anyone else close to you participated in protests about police use of force or police brutality? So you can see the difference between the questions. One says in Minneapolis. The other one says, have you participated in protests? Which, from my reading of that, my interpretation is any protest that has ever happened, ever. Yes, he did. It was about police use of force and police brutality because he had a shirt on that said, get your knees off our necks. It's just, I don't even know that there's an argument there. So we have here, during jury selection, he told Nelson that when he learned that he was a potential juror in the case, he was surprised and shocked. Mitchell wrote on the questionnaire that he had a neutral opinion of Chauvin and Floyd. With respect to Chauvin, he wrote on the questionnaire, I do not believe the defendant set out to murder anyone. However, based on the video, I'm not sure about what the reasoning could be, which is interesting because he told Nelson that he didn't watch the video, right? He said, I couldn't watch it in its entirety because it was too gruesome. But then he says, well, based on the video, I don't know what the reasoning could be. So, who knows how much of it he watched. Asked by Nelson whether he recalled writing that, Mitchell said no, but that he stood by it. Mitchell said that he had seen parts of the video which brought international attention to Floyd's death 2 or 3 times, but never in its entirety. He discussed the case with his friends and family, but not posted any opinions about it on social media, wondered why other officers at the scene did not do anything. He told Nelson that he knew some officers at his gym who are great guys, but did not know enough about defund the police movement to form a strong opinion of it. Said he had a favorable view of BLM. He interprets it as a statement as opposed to a movement. Said he felt neutral about pro-police Blue Lives Matter movement, which I would, does anybody believe that now? It only became a thing to combat BLM, whereas it shouldn't be a competition. Ultimately, he said he could be an impartial juror. Mari Moriarty, a defense attorney in Minneapolis, said the ultimate question is, did Mitchell misrepresent who he was or who he is? She said she does not see how, even if there is a Schwartz hearing, that the trial judge could find Mitchell untruthful based on what is now known. How, even if there is, that the trial could find that he is untruthful. All right, let's carry on. She says, the phrase, get your knees off our necks, has become a rallying cry, Moriarty said. Sharpton's National News Network promoted Get Your Knee Off of Our Necks. Mark Osler, another law professor, said that if Nelson is going to appeal over Mitchell, he would have to prove that he was fooled somehow or that Mitchell was dishonest in his answers, which I think at this point is pretty obvious. He said he believes Mitchell was forthcoming during the jury selection process. Thing is, he was honest about his underlying belief, which is that he felt favorably about BLM. The attorneys knew that. They also knew that the attitude based off lived experience is not a reason to bar anyone from jury service. Yeah, that's true. But he also didn't answer that questionnaire appropriately. If he would have asked, so let's just say on that question number 2 that said anything about, have you been a part of any police protest, any one of them? And it didn't say any, but it said other protests. Have you been in protests? The answer is yes on that. If he would have said yes, then Nelson would have inquired further and dug into that. And maybe he could have, okay, oh, you were. Oh, what protest was that? Oh, it was the March for Washington. Oh, well, tell me more about the March for Washington. Who was there? Well, Floyd's family, the entire family was there. And they spoke? Yeah. And Were you there supporting a cause? Like, maybe that would have teed off Nelson to have his Oppo research people to go and find these photos, and you could have had this juror stricken for cause without even using a peremptory strike. But that didn't happen because the juror was dishonest. He didn't tell him that he in fact was there. So not good. Osler said that it's important to note Nelson ended with peremptory strikes to burn, which meaning he did not use his peremptory strikes, which I think supports the fact that this could have gone differently. If Nelson actually had peremptory strikes left, right? This is where you just get to strike a juror for no reason. You have to have a reason. You can't strike him for race-based reasons or those types of things, but you just, without objection, yep, I'm just going to use this. I get to use this card. This juror is not going to be on the panel. So Eric Nelson had those. If we would have taken a deeper dive into this juror's activities because he would have been honest in that second question, then presumably Nelson would have said, oh, well, that's a pretty big problem for our case. We don't want people who are wearing shirts that say, get your knee off our neck in public protests throughout America on the jury panel because it shows that you're not impartial. And he would have used a peremptory to boot him off of the panel, but he didn't know because the juror was dishonest. He says we can't write off black jurors because they have lived their lives as black people. And that's not what anybody's saying here. All right. Nobody's saying that at all. We're just saying don't be dishonest on a jury questionnaire. All right. So next up, we have Andy NGO, who says Brandon Mitchell, the Chauvin juror, and I know it's Andy, no. Andy NGO says the Chauvin juror who previously attended a BLM event wearing a Get Your Knee Off Our Neck shirt says he didn't remember owning or wearing that shirt. But as recently as 6 months ago, he wore a shirt on a podcast. Oh, it's right there. This is the Wholesome Podcast. So 6 months ago, if we go back 6 months ago, that's going to put us in what? December? The March was in August. Now we're in December. And he's wearing the same shirt again. So he forgot twice? Presumably he washed it and put it back in his closet again and pulled it out to wear it again. But he forgot about it. So he says he doesn't remember. He wore it on a podcast. And Tampa Bay Channel 10 says they're reporting it as well. It shows Mitchell. There's a photo that's recently circulated online. The Star Tribune reported. Shows Mitchell standing with two cousins. Already showed you that picture. He said he doesn't recall wearing or owning the shirt. Then somebody found this podcast, the Wholesome Podcast. How do you feel about dating someone who is abstinent? So this was posted 6 months ago. Doesn't have a lot of views currently at the time that we got this screenshot, but gonna guess that maybe it gets a little bit more of them. Let's see what's happening over here. It's been posted on this channel called B Mitch. Short films, podcast, documentaries, almost everybody can relate to. So if you want to go, support another channel, you're free to do that, of course. And this is a clip from it. So I have not listened to this. Let's see what these gentlemen are talking about.
The podcast, Wholesome B Mitch, a.k.a. Podcast Poppy.
Nigga done changed the name and shit.
We got Wavy Trade with no waves.
Niggas be hating.
And then today we here with DJ, the Don, or whatever he go by now.
Yeah, he go by
the Don DJ.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is like, so you got a girlfriend or something? Are you single? Too much already?
I'm living.
Okay, cool. That's all you got to say.
I'm living. I'm breathing. I'm here.
I just want to preface.
You know what I'm saying? Resilient.
Do that.
Yeah.
I just want to, before I ask this question, I just want to, make sure I'm asking the right question. So let's say y'all out dating or whatever, y'all dating people, and you come across a girl, she's practicing abstinence, or she's celibate. How do y'all feel about dating somebody that's how they get busy?
Ain't nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
You can't have it.
No, I can't.
Well, that's a good question. I'm actually kind of curious where they're going to go with this. What is that gentleman's opinion? And I don't think that their mics are hooked up because you can't hear the audio is a little bit off, but they're making a good attempt at it, and I can empathize, all right, with trying to start a podcast, all right? I've done it, didn't work out too well, and here we are. I made some adjustments and some changes. So, I want to be compassionate and empathetic to these gentlemen. They're having fun. They're talking about some issues, and I encourage that. I really do. I encourage people to stand up and speak up, because if you don't do it, then you're going to live a life of silence, and that's going to have consequences that are probably going to be more severe than the consequences that are associated with speaking out and being involved in something. So I support it, right? Love a podcast. I'm not trying to even throw shade. I'm still going through my own, I still have the training wheels on this show, so I'm not trying to be rude about that. But it is curious that, just the simple fact what they're talking about has nothing to do with George Floyd or Derek Chauvin. It has to do with dating somebody who is abstinent, which is, a thing. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation. They're out having these conversations. They're getting involved in, civil life America. Love that. Love it. I do. I love it. And I think that they should be encouraged to do that. But we also have some pretty interesting evidence here in the form of a t-shirt that also says the same thing that he wore back in August. Get your knee off our necks, BLM, with a double fist raised. And it's there, right? It's for all of us to see. So this idea, well, I just didn't know about it. I was, no, nobody's buying it. Let's take a look at some of the comments. Oh, wow. Okay. We've got a lot of them here. It says, don't worry, guys. He doesn't remember owning this shirt. If the shirt fits, you must acquit. You're kidding me. I love it. Bro, we caught you in 4K. Matter of fact, you caught yourself in 4K. This must be the Emperor's clothing. The appeal is on you, dude, which is think about this, right? Think about this from his perspective. I mean, what an awful situation for him. Now, if you're a Derek Chauvin fan, this guy is your personal hero. This guy may single-handedly be responsible for Derek Chauvin walking away after the country has just been sort of put through the meat grinder. Here we are again. Somebody who is very interested in making sure that they can be a part of this social justice. Said that clearly. Had an interview with another news anchor, I forget her name, but he said something to the effect of, we need to get more black people on juries. She asked him about it specifically. Why is it so important we have black people on jury panels? And he said, we need to get out there and, sort of express our opinion so that we can be a part of some of these decisions. And it's sort of implying that the idea was to enact some social change by getting onto the jury panel, by sort of elbowing your way in there in order to reach a specific outcome, which of course is not the appropriate thing to do if you're a juror. You're supposed to be fair and impartial. Now, some of the feedback or the pushback on that really has been about this idea that, well, we want African-American people on juries. We want a cross-section of our peers. It's a jury of your peers after all. And African-Americans make up a significant portion of this country and they should be on jury panels. I'm not saying that. I never made the argument that they shouldn't be on there. That's insane. That's a ridiculous argument. But what I am saying is that if you're going to put anybody on a jury panel, they're supposed to perform a function that is that of a juror, not that of an activist. And we don't want that going either direction. It really scares me that this could be going that direction. If we're going to get, BLM or any other organizations, Antifa people who are sort of actively trying to shove people onto juries in order to influence outcomes, that is a scary proposition across the board, folks, because for as much as I hear about how racist this country is and about how every single element of it is systemically rooted in the original sin of racism or slavery or whatever, well, listen, there are a lot of African-American people who are going to be going through the justice system. And if this comes to the point where the system is now being weaponized, do you think that is not going to be used against that demographic? Like somehow they're going to be the only demographic that is immune from that type of legal action? No, of course not. It's not a win for anybody. It's a watering down. It's a dilution of the justice system. It's not appropriate. Don't care what color you are or what the reason is or whatever excuse you think is justifiable for getting onto a jury panel and trying to influence the outcome in a way that is not consistent with your duty, your role, and the execution of the law. You don't just get on there and make a decision because you think that's the appropriate policy outcome. The appeal, yeah, it is on him. So somebody who is very active and thrilled to be a part of the process may be the person who literally ruined the whole thing. Says, oh, you lied. It's not like we didn't know it all, but here's the internet is forever proof, pure brilliance. You can't make this up. All this evidence of the drugs in his system, the elephant-sized heart, the 200 over 110 blood pressure. I think it was even worse than that. It was like it was even higher than that. I think it's 220 over 160 something. And a 4-hour deliberation makes so much sense now. Dude, you effed up. Funny how you don't remember the clothes you wear for your own podcast. Interesting strategy there, bud. Nice shirt. Be a shame if this went viral. This man actually infiltrated jury duty. Do you remember what you wore now, juror number 52? Ugh, so painful. So painful that we're going to have to theoretically do this again. And it's warranted. It's absolutely warranted because it was an unfair and not impartial trial. And there was a lot of evidence that was sort of tipping the scale that direction anyways. The $27 million settlement, Maxine Waters parachuting in there. We had, additional shootings right around the same time. No voir dire, no change of venue, and the list goes on and on. Now we have an actual juror who was protesting on behalf of a particular cause directly connected to this case. How can you even feign that this was a fair trial? You can't anymore at this point, and it's largely due to this juror in conjunction with the other things. It's just sort of confirmatory. Let's take a look at some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com if you want to support the show, and we would really appreciate it. That's the place to do it. So first one in today comes from Pato. Says people need to imagine this scenario in reverse. Let's say Chauvin was acquitted, then a picture surfaced of one of the white jurors attending a Back the Blue rally wearing a Free Chauvin shirt. Did Mitchell say it was a MLK rally? All he wants, but his shirt directly refers to George Floyd. Yeah. I mean, what exactly? It's a great question. What happens if that is the situation? If we have a white juror who comes back out, we go on social media, he's on a podcast and he's having a conversation about something unrelated, but he has a Free Chauvin shirt on, or, All Lives Matter, or Back the Blue. That would be a catastrophe. Okay. I would be sitting here going, that's the worst thing. Okay. This is terrible. We need to have another trial and do it again, because that is not appropriate. Same thing here. And I think the other side would even agree with that. John Delar, 52, says, what can happen for the juror for lying about attending the protest? So it's a good question. There are technical answers for this. So the juror could theoretically be, charged with misrepresenting himself. I'm sure there are Minnesota statutes that say it's a crime. It's an actual crime to lie on an official government document. His defense would be, well, I forgot, I didn't know, I didn't understand the question or whatever. So then the prosecution would have to decide whether that was a valid defense, whether they think that they have enough justification, evidence, probable cause to support a conviction against him, and then decide whether or not to charge him. Judged, contempt orders. There are penalties for it, but the question really is, does the prosecution that has the power to bring a criminal charge against him why would they do that? What's the point of doing that? Right? It's the same thing that happened with Maurice Hall, the theoretical co-defendant who was in the front front passenger seat in George Floyd's vehicle. Right? The government, if they wanted the truth in this case to come out, if they wanted all the facts, and I mean that, like all the facts to come out, because they're supposed to be sort of an independent investigative body to go and do justice, not to do convictions. So if they really wanted everything out there, they would have offered Maurice Hall unqualified immunity. Yep, come in, testify, tell us what happened, tell us about the pills, tell us about any transactions, whether you sold anything to Floyd. We're going to give you total immunity for anything you say. But they didn't want him to testify because it would have wrecked their case probably. And they didn't offer him immunity. So why would they do this in this case, right? This juror is on their side. This juror found in favor of the government. So they're going to turn around and charge him with a crime? Even if they could, why would they do that? So this would have to be something that the judge would, initiate, and we would see where it goes. But I don't foresee any consequences for him, other than living with the fact that he may be the one person in this country that's responsible for Derek Chauvin walking free 2 years from now. And I mean that genuinely, because of this. Now, you can't blame him for that because all of this stuff happened before, but I think you can blame him. He should have been honest about it. But, I understand people make mistakes on forums. I get that all the time, but dang, right? This is what a weight to bear. All right. Liberty or Death says, I think that any of these issues on their own might rise to being unfortunate. 27 million, riots, Maxine Waters, the drive-by on the National Guard, Mitchell's conduct, the threat of being doxxed while not even being sequestered, but put them all together and we do a totality of the circumstances review, I hope will lead to a mistrial or the case to be remanded. Due process of law and guarantee of an impartial jury is too important. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that, actually, Liberty. And I think that this is a good summation of this. And you did a nice job bringing in all of the issues that I think we have seen. And when you bundle them up together, yeah, it doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel impartial. And now one of the jurors who was deliberating, clearly biased. All right, we got the DUI guy in the house. Oh, hey, by the way, the DUI guy is coming on the show tomorrow. We're going to do it, I think, at 4:10. We have not spoken before, but he's also got a YouTube channel, so go check him out, the DUI guy. Another criminal defense lawyer. We're going to be speaking with him tomorrow. We're going to do an interview before the first segment of the show tomorrow. So we're excited about that. Let's see what his question is. He says, as a fellow attorney, I know how hard it can be to vet jurors for everything they do in their private lives, especially in this high-profile case. It's impossible to catch everything. Yeah, it is. And a little bit of a curious question I was thinking about last night, the DUI guy. Maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow. I'll get your thoughts on it. But I wonder, so I'm not implying that Eric Nelson did anything unethical or anything like that. But I wonder, we know that his social media team did research on this person or all of the potential jurors because he brought it out in a line of questioning. He asked a juror about it, said, hey, did you ever go to a protest or something? No, I never did. And says, okay, well, because on Facebook, we found that you in fact did. And he goes, oh, forgot I posted that. And it was a very obviously biased post. And I don't think that juror made it onto the panel because of that. And so, we know that Eric Nelson was out, in fact, doing some deep research. My question would be, what if he did know about this? What if he did know? Let the juror on there anyways. As a backup plan. I don't even like to suggest it. But in the event that Chauvin is convicted, well, we know we got a tainted juror here, obviously. Juror lied. Well, we'll ask him about it. Hey, have you been to any protest? No, I have not. He's gone, all right. Got a Facebook post that says you were. In the event that Chauvin gets convicted, now you just bring out your bad juror card. Ooh, now that is not appropriate behavior. Okay, that's not. I'm not implying that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's an interesting thought experiment. If that did happen, we have Sharon Quidney in the house. Says on the T-shirt, really quite cleverly done image since it conflates the civil rights movement, picture of MLK, along with a knee off necks anti-police brutality George Floyd incident. What it's really saying is that the George Floyd incident is symbolic of the, according to critical race theory, universal oppression of blacks by whites, the knee on the neck, and BLM is just a continuation of the great work by MLK and supporters of authentic civil rights. It's a really potent example of propaganda art. It is. I think that's a good point, and it is very, in fact, effective, I think. I think it's very effective, which is why it caught wind, right? He was wearing it because it spoke to him. Let's see here. He says... Nadar Blasier, he's going back through some old episodes. Hey, look at this. You can see the color difference here, right? Look how kind of muted that is. Little purple, little red. And now over here on this side where you can see me right now, I look to be a little bit yellow. So we're still trying to work out some of the colors, but I think this looks a little bit better. All right, anyways. So he says, Nadar Blasier, I'm counting at least 8 questionable jurors based on earlier episodes at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Thanks for the shout out, Nadar. Green equals a known juror. Blue equals highly questionable. Red equals potentially questionable at best. And so he actually went through, this is one of our summations when we were putting this together during Voir dire. Thank you for doing this, Nadar. And so we went back and let's see what we've got. So we have unknown law. So this was, let's see. Coaches, youth, sports. Yeah. Green, known juror. We got some questionables, potentially questionables in the red. Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting sort of thing to do remotely, digitally. I've done jury selection, of course, but I've never done it this way on the other side, kind of listening in. So it's kind of interesting. All right. So thank you for that, Nadarb. LT13 says, I would love the behavior panel to review his jury interview. I just heard it, and you can tell he is making up everything. Yeah, so I think you're talking about the behavior panel. There's this other YouTube channel. I can't remember the name of it right now. I think if you go into like body language experts, it'll be the first one. Super popular channel, has grown like crazy, but they bring these 4 expert witnesses on, and they watch people on videos. They did the Prince Harry, Meghan Markle thing. I watched some of that one because I don't particularly care about that issue, but somebody posted it over on Locals. They posted on Hunter Biden, which was fascinating. Yeah, the panel did a review on Hunter Biden during, I think it was a CBS interview or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, this guy is just flat out lying about everything. And they go, person 1 goes, person 2 goes, 3 goes, 4 goes. So it would be interesting to hear what their take is on Brandon Mitchell. But again, they wouldn't be able to watch it, right? Because all of this was sort of off the record. They can only hear it and make judgments based on the tonality of his voice, which I'm sure they could do. We have Pato says, is it possible that the defense knew about Mr. Mitchell's photos and sat on them to use for the appeal? I just brought that up, Pato. They could have maybe got him excused, but this way they could get a change of venue for the second trial. So I just brought that up. That would not be an ethical thing to do, probably, but it's a good question, and I'd be curious if he did that. Very good question. Liberty or Death says, if they grant a new trial, would Chauvin be let out on bond? Oh, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I would think so, right? Because you would vacate the ruling and you would remand for a new trial. And I think you have a return to your original release conditions. That's what I would speculate, because this is a tainted conviction. The conviction is not good because of the lack of impartiality. So the argument would be, no, you get a new bond again. You vacate the conviction, remand for a new trial, start it over again. So he gets back out of custody. I think that would be my argument. Leafy Bug in the house says, is it usually harder to get a conviction in a new trial? So from a defense perspective, I think that that it can only get better for Chauvin from here. Let's just put it that way. Ordinarily, this is not a common thing. I can't give you a general answer on that, whether it is more common or not. I just don't know the answer to that. But this is something that I think can only get better, right? He was convicted on all 3 counts. Can it get worse than that? No, it can't. So the worst that can happen is you got to go through it again, and he gets convicted again. So what? He's already been convicted, and arguably, right, we can't have an impartial trial in Minneapolis anymore. We already know what happened this last time. The last thing we want to do is do it again, and then have to do it again because we didn't do what we should have done the first go round. So now this justifies a change of venue. This justifies sort of continuances, extensions of court dates, because a lot of that initial furor, I think, is going to have dissipated. I'm not sure you're going to get the same level of volatility for a second trial. And I mean that not because it's any less important, just because people have Chauvin fatigue, right? I mean, how much of the country is going to want to go through the trial again? Otherwise, they'll just say, well, he was convicted. They'll move on to the next thing. We don't know if it's going to be the same level of animosity, volatility, protest, outrage that we saw this last go round in Minneapolis. And last question in the house over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com says, comes from Farmer's Daughter. What's up, Farmer's Daughter? Says, hi, Robert. Hello, everyone. If what you suggested happened with Eric Nelson and he did know about that, could he be disbarred? So, I don't want to sort of speculate on that, because it's a tricky, it's a delicate conversation about an attorney, a criminal defense lawyer, and their duty to their clients and their duty of sort of candor to the other side, right? Yes, there's an argument here that Eric Nelson maybe should have disclosed that if he knew about it, and that the government should have, we should have agreed to have dismissed that juror. And you've got this obligation to be candid with the court. You've got an affirmative duty to that regard. By the same token, you've got a very affirmative duty to your clients, right? Your client is sort of got the cards stacked against them, in my opinion. You've got the prosecution who is coming against them. You've got the entire weight of the prosecution's office, not, thousands of employees typically, unlimited budgets. You've got the courts that are largely, in my opinion, oriented against defendants anyways. They're all part of the same bureaucracy that just wants to, shove people through the system with very little regard to their humanity. So they're part of the problem, in my opinion. But it is still something that, you've got to draw a line in the sand and protect your client. So, if something like this pops up, you got to be asking yourself, is it my responsibility to sort of alert everybody to this thing? Maybe he knew about it, maybe he didn't, and he just said, all right, well, if this person gets, I'm gonna object, and if they let this person on for cause, then that's the court's problem, and they can figure it out. But it's hard to say on that one. I'm gonna punt on that question. I'm not gonna give you a solid answer on it. I really don't. I don't know what the answer is in terms of disbarment. I think that the answer would probably be no. But I'm not I'm not ethics counsel, and I don't want to speculate on something that is just totally speculative, right? We have no idea what happened with Eric Nelson. I think he did a great job as best he could with an impossible trial, and we'll see where it goes. He's filed his motion. He's going to file a more formal brief later down the road, but we may be going through this for the foreseeable future. Derek Chauvin. Again? Yeah, maybe again. All right, so we're going to change gears. We're going to talk about Alaska now. We don't ever really venture outside of continental United States, but we're going to.